Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome back to my channel. It's almost time once again for the Pulitzer to announce its raft of winners for the year, with that announcement coming on the 5th of May 2025, so pretty soon. For the last few years, I've been trying to have a go at guessing which books might be in the running to win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction and which ones I think could well win. I have had varying levels of success with that. 2 years ago, I picked both Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead and Trust by Hernan Diaz as frontrunners, and they ended up winning the prize and sharing it. That wasn't really some incredible or even impressive act of clairvoyance, to be honest, because they were widely pointed to as the two books most likely to take home the prize. But it was nice to finally get a prediction correct. Last year, I thought we might be in a pretty similar position because there were two books that seemed to stand out from the pack. We had Northwoods by Daniel Mason and The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. But then the Pulitzer surprised everyone by choosing Night Watch by Jane Ann Phillips. I have read this one since it was awarded the prize, and I'm sad to report that I think it was just not a very good book. It relies on absolutely ludicrous coincidence for its plot. So I'm hoping that whatever the judges were smoking last year, they have not taken out a repeat prescription. This is a prize that is incredibly hard to predict because it casts its net very wide. The judges are tasked to award the prize on the following basis: for distinguished fiction published in book form during the year by an American author, preferably dealing with American life. So drilling slightly further down into the detail, the only criteria really are that it needs to have been written in English by an American citizen or resident, published in a physical format by an American-based publisher, and be published for the first time in the calendar year of 2024. In theory, any book could win. Books from any genre, graphic novels, and even self-published books are eligible, and anyone can submit a book as long as they pay the $75 cost of entry. It doesn't need to be the author or the publisher. The other thing that makes this quite hard to predict is that there is no long list phase. So in a lot of prizes, they have between 12 and 16 books that they'll announce as their long list. The Pulitzer doesn't do any of that. They just announce 3 books and then they tell you the winner at the same time. When you have a long list, it's possible to guess 2 or 3 of the books that might be on that list. When you have such a large number of possible contenders and only 3 books that are going to be announced, it makes it really hard to find the needle in the haystack. But it is still fun to guess, and so that is what I'm going to do today. I've got 3 books that I think are probably the front runners as far as I see it, and then 6 other books that I think could be contenders. Let's dive straight into the first front runner, which I think is going to come as no surprise to anyone watching, because my first pick is James by Percival Everett. If you gave me £100, or rather, I guess in this case it's more appropriate to be $100, but if you gave me $100 to bet on which book would win, I would put 99 of them on James. You probably know all about this book. It was on basically every literary fiction reader's favourite list last year, at least in this corner of booktube, and it's a retelling of Huckleberry Finn from the perspective of the runaway slave Jim. And I think the reason that this book is so likely to win is that it tells a story of a period of American history directly, of the circumstances before the American Civil War. But the project of this book also tells a more metatextual story about the stories that it was possible to tell back then when the original Huckleberry Finn was written, where even an abolitionist like Mark Twain wasn't equipped to give Jim a full life, a full character, and this book comes and restores some of that depth. It's a very tender book that is not critical of the original, but it has a really interesting conversation with it, and I think it would be a very worthy winner. My second front runner is All Fours by Miranda July. This is a surprisingly divisive book, and while I loved it, I know that many people did not. I think it was fun, it's funny, it's irreverent, it's crass, but Miranda July, I think, really circles around some hard to decipher truths about art and capitalism, about love and desire and womanhood. And it's probably on that last point a little that the book falls down for some readers, because there seems to be some expectation that it's going to be this highly relatable book, and it's absolutely not. I obviously was never going to relate to it because I am a reasonably young man, and this is about a woman going through perimenopause and some of her reactions to it in her life. But I think it's been sold to many readers who are women as a relatable book, but it's not. It's about this artsy weirdo going through something incredibly unusual in her life, and I just had an absolutely fantastic time with it. Despite Loving it though. I probably wouldn't have thought of this as a contender, but it has been nominated for every prize under the sun except like the Booker Prize. So something is clearly resonating with the critics, and I don't think we can count it out. My final frontrunner pick is Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange. And this is Tommy Orange's follow-up to his novel There, which was a Pulitzer Prize for Fiction finalist in 2019, but it lost out to The Overstory by Richard Powers. This is a sort of prequel and a sequel to that book. It examines the historical context to the devastating events of There in terms of like the family history of some of the characters and what happened afterwards. I thought it was terrific, really, just beautifully written. Tommy Orange's writing style is exactly the sort of assured playfulness that I love in a book, but I do wonder if this sufficiently stands alone enough to be a likely winner. Some people have told me that it does, others have said that it doesn't, but I read the two books kind of together with Wandering Stars sandwiched around There, so I just don't know. But I do think it's a brilliant book and it's a strong contender for this prize. So those are my three frontrunners. These are the books and the authors that I most expect to flash up on screen when the winners are announced in a couple of weeks' time. And if these were the finalists with James winning, I think that would be like a really good reflection of 2024 and what it had to offer in terms of fiction. But I do think there are a bunch of other books, of course, that could be worthy of the prize. And I've picked 6 books out here that I'm going to tell you about, which I think could come along and surprise us and take home the Pulitzer or just be listed as finalists. The first one of those is The Hearing Test by Eliza Barry Callahan. This one is about a woman who suffers from sudden deafness and then has to figure out how to navigate the world and how to navigate the American health system. It's apparently funny, insightful, philosophical, and it was longlisted this year for the Carol Shields Prize, which is the American equivalent to the Women's Prize in the UK. In many ways, this feels like a polar opposite book to All Fours, because both protagonists experience a change in their bodies. But while in All Fours, the response is almost this form of mania, here it seems to be a cool reserve and a shift to observation, to taking the world in through other senses. And I think that sounds really interesting. Another potential contender is a book that's only just been released in the UK but came out in the US last year, so during the eligibility window, and that is Beautyland by Marie-Helene Bettino. This is about a woman who, ever since she can remember, feels this connection to a faraway planet, and then she finds herself able to communicate with it via fax machine. Using this ancient technology, she then sends reports home to this faraway planet on the oddities of us Earth dwellers. I think there is a risk of this being seen as not heavyweight enough for the Pulitzer, but we saw something speculative as a finalist last year with Same Bed, Different Dreams by Ed Park, and I do wonder if we could see a book like this, or perhaps even this book, go one better. Reality is surprising enough on a daily basis now that I don't see any reason why a speculative book couldn't win this prize. Next is Hombrecito by Santiago Jose Sanchez. This is about the life of one man who moved with his mother from Colombia to the US when he was a child. It charts his relationship with his mother, with the men in his life and in his bed, and with both his birth country and with the America that he now calls home. I think this sounds great, and I just wonder if, given everything that is going on in US politics, a story of immigration, of Americans that straddle cultures who don't necessarily feel at home in either one, maybe a really compelling sort of story for the prize. Okay, so short story collections are definitely eligible, but a collection hasn't won the prize in quite a while. One that I have seen universal praise for, though, and which I think could be a contender for the Pulitzer, is The History of Sound by Ben Shattuck. This is a dozen stories that cover 3 centuries of American history, and it has this really interesting structure where each story is in some way paired with another one in the book. It's set in New England and it's supposed to be funny and full of humanity. And one of the stories is actually already being turned into a movie starring Paul Mescal and Josh O'Connor. So a Pulitzer win could really build the hype for this movie's Oscar chances. Okay, so this next one sounds pretty wild. Say Hello to My Little Friend by Janine Capot Crusay is described as Scarface meets Moby Dick. And it's about a Pitbull impersonator who lives in Miami, and he is left adrift when Pitbull sends him a cease and desist. He's basically told to can it, and you know what? Fair enough, because there is only one Pitbull. And our protagonist, Izzy, which is short for Ishmael, hence the Moby Dick connection, he decides to turn himself into a modern-day Tony Montana, a godfather. It sounds like lots of fun, and in a way it's giving Grand Theft Auto Vice City if that were a novel and not a video game. My final guess is a book called Someone Like Us by Dinao Mengistu. This one is about a man whose marriage in Paris is collapsing, and so he returns to the close-knit immigrant Ethiopian community that he grew up in Washington, D.C. And on the same day that he arrives, his father figure is found dead. He ends up having to confront his marriage, but also the unsolved mystery of this death and the troubling memories of his own that are in some way connected to it. This is another story about immigrant communities. I have picked a few of these, but I just think it's a very urgent theme, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it reflected in the Pulitzer judges' picks. So that was a very quick rundown of some books that I think could be in contention for this year's Pulitzer. I'd love to know if you have read any of these and whether you think they are sort of up to the standard that the Pulitzer might expect, whether you think they are genuine contenders. And if there are any books that I haven't included in my list but you think are potential or very deserving winners of the Pulitzer, then do let me know in the comments. I would love to hear what you think is likely to take home the trophy. Is it a trophy or is it a medal? I think it's a medal. Anyway, there's not very long to go until we find out. May the 5th be with you. But until next time, toodles.